Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Korolov. I'm the editor of MetaStellar, and we're doing the latest in our series of interviews with science fiction and fantasy authors. With us today is Josh Jones, whose short story, Lizzie Williams Swampy Head, was published in MetaStellar in May. It was one of the 10 stories that we chose in spring's original fiction submission cycle. So we had over something like 300 submissions. So it was a great story. I mean, all of our judges liked it. We went through several rounds and we really enjoyed it. So can you tell us about how that story came to be and a little bit about it for our readers, for our viewers? We're on YouTube.
Yes, sure. Well, I'm so glad you enjoyed it and was thrilled to have MetaStellar pick it up. I think it's a great home for it, and been excited to read the other pieces on MetaStellar. As for the piece, I really, this is one of the few pieces I started from a prompt where I actually had a picture of a painting that was used to inspire a story, a picture of a sort of a spooky, almost disembodied head of that the artist had rendered. And so I took that prompt and started thinking about heads and disembodied heads specifically, and well, what would it mean to have someone having a disembodied head? And then from there, much of it came about through the setting and thinking of a southern setting. I originally grew up in the southern United States, parts of Tennessee, and then later in Georgia. And although I've not lived there in many years, I often find myself drawn to those southern settings where you have alligators and Spanish moss and just that heat that's so oppressive, and of course the vernacular of Southerners in their own ways of congregating and talking with one another. So between those two elements, thinking about the setting and thinking about this detached head, the piece began to unspool and take form into what you see today.
All right, so I want to ask you about the ending. Now, I know it's kind of the ambiguity is kind of like what makes it a great story. But tell me, what is it? What is it really?
Oh, so I really love the idea of ending almost on a cliffhanger, but I think the idea of seeing this collective group of children closing in on Lizzie Williams as she is holding her head, and the head who says, "No, there is another head," when they have their sharp tools and their spades and other sorts of implements that could be a little bit on the dangerous side. I like the idea of just ending on that threatening image where nothing good is going to happen next, and the violence of the storm helping kind of fill in the blanks there.
So, if you were to turn this into a novel, like where would it go?
Oh, that's frightening. That's the N word for me. The novel. Oh, I am definitely a short story writer for now. Maybe one of these days I would write something longer, and I've tried my hand at longer works, but they have always stalled out either around the 20,000 word mark or so. It's like barely getting out of the gate. I never envisioned this particular piece as anything more than a flash fiction. I write a lot of flash fiction, and I have a sort of instinct whether a piece is going to be around that length or not. If I were to expand it into something longer, I still don't see it becoming a novel, but say a longer short story, I could see looking more into the lives of the people in this town, and maybe Lizzie Williams, Pappy, or the other characters that she interacts with, and or doing a series of connected shorts where you kind of have this gothic setting and maybe all sorts of creepy things happen. But a novel seems a little bit of a stretch for this.
I can see it as an episode of something like The Twilight Zone
Sure.
or X-Files.
Mm-hmm.
You put them together, or those are like would be equivalent to like a novella. That's a 20,000 word length.
Yes. Yes.
And they do very well on Amazon. I mean, in traditional publishing, novellas tend not to do well because of this distribution system makes it really difficult for that form factor.
Sure.
But on Kindle, it's perfect.
Oh.
Yeah.
Something to think about. Yeah, I've shied away from the kind of the in-between lengths between novelette and novel because they are difficult to publish traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to write mostly flash or short stories. Even longer short stories, I have difficulty placing sometimes. You know, once it gets over 5,000 words, that can be a challenge, depending on the market.
Yeah. Well, in order to be science fiction and fantasy qualifying publication, we have to pay 8 cents a word. And very few publications have the budgets to publish long form fiction.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. So I've been looking at you know, obviously pro paying is great, but they're understandably very, very competitive. But even semi-pro and payments, and also in the non-speculative markets, I write a number of more traditional literary pieces. The pay there is often very, very marginal, just because they don't have the budgets. But it's a different piece.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't charge for subscriptions. So our entire budget comes from donations.
Yeah.
We're all run by volunteers.
And that's great that you are able to sustain that, because I know that has to be very challenging from just a operating stance.
The way we do it is that we pay for original fiction. And like I said, we get like 300 submissions for like 10 that we can publish. But we also do unlimited reprints. We don't pay for reprints. But if you publish anywhere else, including on your own website, we can run the reprint. We won't pay you for it, but it'll be published in MetaStellar. So, which is kind of the compromise we did, because we're a bunch of writers who launched it in order to have a place to get published. But all of us are like, we want to be a qualifying market, but we also want to publish everything we can because we're online. We have unlimited space. So, so we decided to kind of have our foot in both. And if it's been published anywhere at all, we'll publish excerpts and reprints. If doesn't matter if it's on your website, if you publish it on a Facebook page, previously published, it's good. We publish it as a reprint, and we publish several reprints a week. It still has to go through an editorial approval process. It still has to go through copy editing, but we can publish everything we like. Versus with our paying submissions, the original fiction submission cycles, those are short cycles. There's like a month-long window, and we can only publish a small fraction of the submissions we actually like. So so that's kind of how we're straddling it, and because we want to keep it free for our readers, and we want to have an opportunity for writers to get exposure, to find readers, and to drive people to their websites, their Amazon author pages, to their mailing list subscriptions, that kind of stuff. We want to help you build your platform so that when you're ready to go to an agent or a traditional publisher, you can say, I've been published in these magazines. I have this number of people on my mailing list. I have this number of followers to my social media account for my author page, that kind of thing. Which reminds me, for our viewers, if you scroll down into the description, you can find Josh's all his contact information, website, Twitter account, everything else. So you can look him up, follow him, read his other stories. And then when you do finish your novel,
I had to start it first.
they can be notified of it or your short story collection. So you have because you have a lot of short stories that are out, and I want to talk about some of those as well, because I have a whole bunch of virtual backgrounds queued up with things from you. So there's your website address, jjlaughlin.com.
So very recently, I have started shifting to writing under Joshua Jones Laughlin. This is partially to honor some family heritage, where Laughlin was my ancestry name, but also Jones is so common of a name, it makes it very difficult to be searched for, be found. So I wanted to have something that was a little bit easier for people to find, and so even though all my previous publications have just been under Joshua Jones, this will hopefully be easier for people to find in the future. And I'm kind of in a transitional period right now.
Well, email me when you're ready, and we'll change your byline and your author bio and everything to your phone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so and give you an inbound link for your website and everything else.
Awesome.
All right. And you won a couple of awards.
Yes, I've been fortunate to have had my some of my short fiction, my flash fiction, be included in the Best Microfictions 2020 anthology and the Best Small Fictions 2019 anthology. I've also received a handful of other honors, winning some contests, and there was a Paper Darts is a journal that ran a contest with judged by Lisa Cross Smith, that I came first place in that. I won the Ronald Moran Prize in Fiction for the South, a piece that appeared in the South Carolina Review. These are more traditional literary stories. And I believe I had a scary story, that was a lot of fun, that was a runner-up in the Cease Cows Scary Story Contest that ran a couple years ago, I believe.
Can you tell us about the doppelgangers? The doppelgangers in first place.
So that was a piece that appeared in Alex Springs, and here's Alex Springs. They are a really wonderful journal for doing hybrid literary and genre hybrid pieces. They wrote fiction and nonfiction and poetry.
Why don't I go close the door and kick all the animals out? I just should have done that before. And we'll try to edit that out in editing.
Okay.
Okay. Buddy, do you want to go? Oh, he knows. He knows I'm trying to get rid of him. All right, I have a solution for that. Where is it? Cat treats.
Yes. I'm very familiar with cat treats.
You want a cat treat? Do you want a cat treat? Oh my, he's not falling for it. All right, I'm gonna try to wrestle him out of here. Okay. All right, can you tell where am I? All right, why don't you tell us about, okay, let's try this again. Why don't you tell us about the doppelgangers of Thurston Place?
So this was a piece that appeared in Outlook Springs, which they are a really wonderful journal for doing a hybrid between speculative fiction and literary fiction. They love good stories. It doesn't matter if it's completely weird and sort of off the normal realist spectrum. They like pushing those boundaries. And this piece started with me thinking about, well, what if in suburbia every family has a set of doppelgangers? And these doppelgangers are really, really desperate to replace their real counterparts. And so you start out in this piece looking over the doppelgangers, just staring into this family's dinner scene very hungrily. The doppelganger father and the doppelganger son, and how they want to replace the Elliot inside and Elliot's son
That
inside.
sounds wonderful. I just imagine like having a doppelganger come and replace me, and I could go off and do stuff and like leave the suburbs, leave the kids. Oh,
Yeah.
but you don't mean it that way.
No, not quite. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a little bit more of a sinister aspect to it, and certainly deals with conformity of suburbia and how, what does it mean to be individual, and when everyone else is kind of perhaps just like you. So I had a lot of fun with that. And actually, originally, before it got published in Elk Springs, was a runner-up in the Masters Review a fall fiction contest judged by Kelly Link. And I was so thrilled to have Kelly Link be able to actually read my work. And even though it wasn't finalist, it was semi-finalist, it was still just an honor just to have that. Kelly Link's one of my favorite writers.
Can you tell us about what the Jesus man's eyes won't see?
So here is another piece that actually had its origins in a prompt. For those flash fiction writers out there who like working on prompts, every month the Australian Writers Centre runs a furious fiction contest where they give you a series of restrictions, such as it must contain the word lemon, or it must be set on the side of the road, or it must be have a crucifix or in the title. I think icon was one for this particular prompt. And they'll give you these strange set of prompts. One was that every you had to start your story with the letter J, or and some of them are kind of silly, but they make you think, and they push boundaries, and sometimes you come up with something great, sometimes you spin your wheels. But if someone likes those sorts of restrictions, I recommend checking them out. And the other interesting aspect of this particular contest is you only have a little over 2 days to come up with something and submit it. So you can't really overthink it. You just got to go with it. So I started this piece from that prompt. It didn't end up in their particular contest. I was able to then take some time off from it, revise it, clean it up, and submit it to Necessary Fiction, and they were a great home for it. This is the second piece I've had with Necessary Fiction, and I'm really a fan of their aesthetic, and they like pieces that run the gamut of between realist to a little bit more speculative. This is more of a what would happen if after the apocalypse all you have are kids looking for dogs to eat on the side of the road, and then they have to deal with creepy creatures, and so a little bit of a apocalyptic piece. I don't think it was a coincidence that this was written in 2020 when everything seemed apocalyptic. So definitely had a apocalyptic sort of writing spree last year.
And for those people interested, we're going to put the links to the prompt sites that Josh is talking about in the description below. All right, can you talk about the Sleepwalker?
So this was my first accepted piece when I started really writing seriously a number of years ago. And this is a little bit more of a traditional ghost story. I grew up on ghost stories. In Eastern Tennessee, we would go to storyteller festivals where, there's a grand tradition of telling, spooky campfire stories with professional storytellers. And it attracts people from all over the world to come and tell stories from different traditions. And there's just something very primal and universal about the ghost story that I really like. And I started working on this and was able to get it published in the Golden Key, which is inspired by Grimm. They publish a lot of fairy tales and fantasy type pieces. They take their name from, I believe, the Brothers Grimm has a quote about the Golden Key. And unfortunately, I don't think they are still active, but they still have, their website's still up. The pieces are still available to read, but I don't believe they're accepting any more submissions. That's the one downside of so many online journals, well, print journals as well, is they don't always have the longest lifespan. But I was very honored to have this be my first publication, and they gave it some wonderful illustration to go with it, and I just like that. I kind of got my start with a ghost story just because that's what I grew up on.
And this looks a little creepy too.
Yes, this was my scary story contest.
Let's see if I can move my head out of the way so you can see
referenced earlier. And this was a piece that was very short, but I revised and revised and revised it because it was almost poetical in terms of having a little bit of a meter, even though it's I wouldn't consider it poetry, but it riffs off the kind of nursery rhyme. This is the house that Jack built, where it has a very iambic pentameter toward it, or iambic beat, and it is all about, this is the key that Jack has. This is the key to the house where Jack lives. This is the key to the room. And again, it's a bit of a spooky story of what is behind that door. Why is Jack afraid? And so between the repetitive nature and the language and the rhythm of it, and just the increasing spooky vibe, I think it resonated with a number of people, and I was very pleased to have Sea Scows publish it.
And the last one I wanted to ask you about was Beyond the Villa of Orman, which also looks spooky. I'm seeing a trend here.
Yes, well, I figured we're more interested in talking about speculative pieces. I do tend to write more in the horror genre when I do write speculative pieces, which is somewhat ironic because I haven't historically gravitated towards scary movies or even horror novels as much. Stephen King scared me to death when I was young, and but I still find myself gravitating toward writing them, and I don't know why that is. This I would say is less scary and more of another apocalyptic piece, and in the vein of being on the top of the world and the Villa of Orman, which is in Scandinavia. And this is where I was taking disparate elements from using some inspiration from David Bowie songs. In some of his music, he talks about being in the Villa of Orman in his song Black Star, and there's a lot of apocalyptic imagery in that, and then some of his other pieces also are tinged with very dark motifs that I kind of drew upon to come up with this piece of a village dealing with a nuclear sort of holocaust, and going into the bomb shelters and then emerging afterwards with the northern lights and everything glowing. And so combination of setting and extreme circumstance is part of this. And it's a very short piece. Journal of Compressed Matter Arts only, I think they only publish pieces that are 500 words or less.
Okay, so I want to ask you what you're going to do next.
What am I doing next in terms of writing?
Well, yeah.
I am working on, currently revising a kind of climate fiction inspired apocalyptic piece. It seems to be a theme recently. I probably go through waves where I work on that. I usually have a number of pieces of various completeness in the hopper, and I will revise, come to a completion of a draft, put it aside, and then work on something else, put it aside, and repeat until I eventually get to a place where I'm happy with that. I like to space out my revisions so that I can look at them with fresh eyes, so I'm not just looking at the same thing over and over and over for weeks on end. I can be a bit of a slow writer because of that, but it's a process that mostly works for me.
All right. I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today, or talk to me today. And I want to tell our readers to follow Josh on his website, and we had the link up above, and we have it in the description below. And all of our content is thanks to our contributors on Patreon, and the link to that is below as well. And we got merch, so links to that as well. And all the proceeds go to support original fiction. All of our staff are volunteers. We just love speculative fiction, and we love putting it out there, and it's always going to be free for our readers. So thank you very much. And if you like this kind of author interview, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much, Josh, for coming and talking to me.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for hosting and for being behind MetaStellar. The fiction on there is fantastic in every sense of the word, and I can't wait to read more pieces that you put up there.
Well, anytime you want to come back to talk about speculative fiction, movies, TV, video games, or books. You know where to find us. Book. I was like, there's more. Oh yeah, right. Book. Thank you so much again. I hope you have a great summer.
Thank you. You too. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.